Okay, finally, we come to that place where we have walked through different aspects of our pain, happy purpose series, and we're on this place. Well, I should say, at this place where it has gotten a little, I want to say, challenging because we're forced to really look at things that we are not always comfortable talking about,
Right.
and at the same time we need to, in order to do good, to do justice, to bring certain things to the surface that is beneficial for our own personal growth but also for the body of
Absolutely.
Yeshua, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So I was thinking, from our last, we looked at what that looks like in terms of context for leadership and the difference between counseling, the need for counseling versus deliverance. And now we're going to look at what that could also be if it's not really something that is necessarily spiritual, since we're still dealing with that, but how it can become spiritual.
Right.
For example, we were talking about if somebody has a childhood trauma that after many years of it not being addressed properly with the correct type of counseling becomes a stronghold, and then that person is in fact going to need deliverance.
Okay.
What are some of the challenges and setbacks for that individual and even for those that are growing in faith and is dealing with the repercussion of not dealing with that at the appropriate time? Are you following what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. So I have seen and heard about situations where persons have gone through childhood trauma, whether it was some sort of emotional hurt or sexual molestation. And so because of that, they did not speak about it to their parents. And I've heard many stories. And so because of that, it continued. And you find that after a while that now it's coming out inappropriately. It's not coming out at the time when it should have, when it happened. But it's
Right.
coming out now years later, and it's coming out in some sort of a spew, where maybe you're on social media or you're speaking about the situation inappropriately in front of people that have nothing to do with it, because you want to shame, because of the anger, because of the hurt, because of the pain, because of the frustration of it not being handled.
So the person is taking it in their own hands.
Absolutely.
And they're saying in a vindictive way, you have hurt me and now I'm going to hurt you.
I'm going to hurt you.
But in the process, they're really hurting themselves even
Hurting
more.
themselves, and now the trauma that you have faced through people in your life, you're putting it back on them and injecting more. So instead of that person having time to say, whoa, you know, I was wrong for what I did, let me look at myself, let me apologize. You know, maybe I was in the wrong headspace, maybe I was going through trauma, maybe what I did to you, it was inflicted on me, you know, so you don't
That part.
understand why I did why I did, you know. And so now it's being blown totally out of proportion.
This is what they call generational curses
Generational curses.
in family
And
settings, yes.
hurt people.
Right.
So it continues, and so there's really no resolution. And we want to make sure that there is resolution. This is why we're doing this podcast, because we want to make sure that at the end of this, that if people are going through this process, that they handle it correctly, where they no longer have that pain, and hopefully at some point there's total healing.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we're talking about appropriate handling of the situation, and appropriate sometimes will mean timely,
Absolutely.
because time is of essence, because
Yes.
it is not the fact that it's not addressed when it's supposed to is what forces it into that space of stronghold,
Yes.
where at that place you're probably looking at deliverance in addition to therapy, not just
Absolutely.
one over the other, but in
Yes.
some cases both. And hopefully sometimes you can get, that deliverance that is needed, and you never have to go back. But I think that therapy is not a bad thing, especially if you need to identify the correct steps in bringing closure to whatever offenses brought you to that place where your pain is going to serve its true purpose. And talking about true purpose, I think that it's important to recognize that any way you take it, your pain is going to serve some purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
We
For
want
good
for
or bad.
for good or bad. We
Absolutely.
want it to be for good.
Absolutely.
That's the whole goal, right, of our conversation, is to bring it to a place where we turn our lemons into lemonade.
Right.
But some lemonades need a little bit of sugar,
A lot more sugar.
a lot more sugar than others. But you know what? The funny thing about it, sugar can be harmful, especially for people who are diabetic,
Absolutely.
right? So when we're talking about our using our purpose in a way that it doesn't benefit the things that we would not want to feed, right?
Right.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Your pain has purpose, but you want your purpose to be good. But if you're not careful, that same pain can be the purpose of the enemy, and you become a perpetrator of that. In other words, you're now going to be hurting people in ways that you have been hurt. And I think that is where we're trying to stop that from
Right.
happening, that
Right.
generational curse. And we say, it ends with us, it ends with you and me deciding that I will not hurt people in the way that I've been hurt.
Right.
I will not perpetrate this thing anymore, because I want to be a blessing. I want to bring healing. I want to be a representation of good, so that people can trust me with their vulnerabilities. What are some of the ways that you think we can do that, Ingrid?
Well, I'm thinking the very first thing we need to do is look at whatever it is that is happening to us
Mm-hmm.
and recognize it for what it is.
Mm.
And understand that, you know, what you felt going through that pain, if you were the person that is in the position that is going through the pain, or you're going through some sort of trauma, you want to make sure that you don't inflict it.
Mm.
It's like when we were going through this thing that happened 2 years ago, 3-4 years ago.
Mm.
Beginning with a C and ending with an ID.
Mhm.
You know, everybody put on
I think you're
a
talking
mask.
about the pandemic.
Pandemic. Everybody put on a mask.
Yes.
Why? Because we didn't want to infect the next person,
Mm.
even if that person was in your home. So you had to stay in place.
Mm.
You know,
Respect boundaries.
respect boundaries.
Yes.
So I think it's the same type of ideology where we have to look at ourselves and say, okay, this is what's going on with me.
Mhm.
I don't want you to feel this, because I'm going through this. Maybe this person, you're infected. Maybe you're going through
I like
the whole
that.
thing where, you know, you're sick, you're throwing up, you're going through the pain. And so because of that, just because of the compassion, you know, for others. But again, when you're going through a certain type of trauma and you're angry, you don't care who you hurt. So some people infected people, other people on purpose, because they had no compassion.
Yeah.
They were angry.
If it
they
happened
were
to me,
bitter.
it happened to you.
Yeah, come on
So
and
what?
join
Yeah.
the sick party.
Yeah.
Everybody's part of this club.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have to look at yourself and ask God to give you compassion, and ask God to help you to change, and ask the Father to help you to not put on others what you are going through. And so once you have done that, now you address the person. So persons have hurt you.
Yeah.
It's time, at some point, you have to stop people pleasing, go back to people pleasing, and say, you know what, this is what I'm feeling. This is how you've hurt me. I have gone through that with someone where I realized that I had hurt persons, and I had to look at myself and say to myself, how could you have done this? This was really wrong. You know, what I didn't tell the person is that, you know, is that I also was hurt.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
But I had to accept my responsibility.
But that's not an excuse.
It's not an excuse.
Right.
I accepted my responsibility in the whole matter and said, you know what, Ingrid, you were wrong. You have to face the person, no matter
Irregardless of
how
what was done to you.
painful, and no matter how painful, And no matter how embarrassed and whatever, you need to go back and say, listen, I was wrong. I am sorry.
Yeah.
Ask that person for forgiveness. And that's what
Yes.
I did.
Yeah. I
So
like that.
I'm free from that. So this is what we have to do
Mhm.
as men and women of God. This is what we have to do. We have to accept responsibility for the things that we have done wrong. Now,
Mhm.
if you have a different mindset where you're going to inject pain, then maybe you have something else going on. Maybe you need deliverance.
Yeah. For
Maybe you have a
sure.
stronghold.
For
And can you
sure.
speak about strongholds for our viewers that maybe don't understand what that is?
Right. Well, definitely a stronghold. And I really affirm what you're saying, and it does make sense, the whole idea of recognizing where you have fault people. Because again, we like to talk about how people have wronged us,
Right.
but it's also true that we've wronged people. And
Absolutely.
it's not a very easy place to be, to own up to. So again, I really appreciate you acknowledging that and coming alongside to say that. And I'm also going to say, in terms of the stronghold, that means that you are no longer going to be allowing your hurt to serve the purpose of the stronghold, because the stronghold is really that position. For example, when a country goes into another country and they overtake that area, they would typically put up a flag, right?
Right,
To say
right.
that we have dominion over you.
Right.
A stronghold is kind of like that.
Wow.
A stronghold is kind of like something that is overtaking your life in a way that causes the enemy to be able to say, I have authority over you now because you did not overcome this thing.
So, are you saying that when persons are going through something, the trauma, that at some point they need to stop midpoint and say, listen, I need to address this now? It's like having a cut. And
Mm,
if you do not take care of that cut right away, it can get infected. You could bleed out. So this is something that we need to take care of now. So
no.
what I'm hearing you saying is that if you don't take care of that stronghold, then
Stronghold take care of you.
wow,
So that
okay,
is it, is either
that's
to
very
live or
good.
to die,
Right,
right? And you have to choose to live.
right,
So yes, that is a good example in terms of bleeding out. You could die. You could
right,
also live, but you have an infestation, and you have to continually go back to nursing that wound. And so at some point in time, that wound might not take you out, but it will you will spend so much time trying to take care of it that you are dying eventually. You're dying because you're not able to live. You're not able to live in the way that God ordained you and would want you to live, which is to
right, right.
prosper.
So I'm thinking, and from what I'm hearing, it would be better for us to take care of the situation right away and end up with a scar than to let that thing take us out. Because we don't want that flag saying we now have possession of
Or
you. And
dominion over you.
that's where the stronghold has gotten to a point now where now that spirit
You're a
is,
prisoner.
you're a
You're
prisoner.
captive.
Wow.
There goes the word captive. You're made captive, and
Right.
captivity, that's what stronghold does.
Right.
And also, when you talk about scar, it's better to be left with a scar, because you know
Absolutely.
what? A scar is a reminder that you overcome at
Yes.
best.
Yes.
You can say, you know what? I have a scar, but I healed. I have a scar, but it's a reminder that I don't want to go back to that place
Mhm.
where I am allowing myself to be in full possession of the enemy,
That's
because
right.
God, Son, Yeshua, died to set us free from that.
Mhm.
And so when we're talking about the whole idea of your pain having purpose in this series, we looked back at what it looks like to own our stuff, to know the difference between an apology and saying sorry, to grow in the spaces that we're recognizing that hurt people, but loving people love, and we need to love ourselves to have healthy boundaries for ourselves,
Correct.
but to respect the boundaries of others,
Absolutely.
realizing that we have hurt people. People will hurt us, but we will refuse to become perpetrators.
Yes.
And because of that, we also have to hold people responsible for their actions, that we don't feed into that fuel where you want to become a codependent and make man your false refuge. Even if God may put people in your life who could walk you through those places, whether it is a pastor, a counselor, whatever it is, but they are not God. At some point in time, we're saying you need to talk to God for yourself.
Yes.
See if this person is the right person. Don't allow or give everyone permission to speak into your life. And to recognize that when you have hurt people, you want to overcome by acknowledging early on, deal with it, and go get the help that you need. And not all help needs deliverance. Some help needs acknowledgement from the parties who have hurt you to come to the table, talk about it, find practical solutions, move on, and live your life.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And that's what we want for our listeners. That's what we want for, everyone that's participating in this with us. And that's what we want for ourselves. Because,
For ourselves.
it's one thing to speak about it. It's another thing to do it. How many people, they say, do what I say, but
But
don't
not as I do.
right? Or vice
Unfortunately,
versa. So, we want to make sure that we don't perpetuate the issue. And, I've seen people where they talk about it and they talk about it and they talk about it and they go on and on and on about their hurts. At some point, it needs to stop. We need to stop the bleed. So what would you do if you heard somebody, for instance, constantly speaking about a pain issue, a pain point? What would you say to them, or what would you suggest?
You know what? I've done things that I think when people sometimes, it's kind of like when you're a parent and your child keeps nagging you and saying something to you, and you kind of like tune them out at some point in time because it's annoying.
Right.
So we're not perfect. Sometimes your response to it might not be the best, but sometimes it's needed. Sometimes you have to really pull that person aside and say, listen, you are not going to heal or grow if you continue to regurgitate.
Yes.
Sometimes you just have to call a thing a thing. But there are times when you really have to look at it from the perspective of the person and put yourselves in their shoe.
Right.
So depending on the situation, we're going to look at the context and decide on how, because not every situation is going to demand the same approach, right?
Yeah.
But I really think that as long as we do it in a truthful and loving way, however and whatever that looks like, I believe that should be taken into consideration, because the way that I recommend it might not be the right way, right? And so I'm not going to presume that I have the answer. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm certainly not an expert in everything. I believe, though, that common sense and wisdom comes with some lived experiences. So I would just recommend that you first look at and listen to the reason why the person feel the way they do, and honor and respect that. Because I think if we listen, even if we don't understand, it will give us some place to respect that that person's feelings has merit before God. Like, even if that person is wrong in their approach, it doesn't mean that their pain is not true. And I think that is what we need to look at. Yeah.
Even if they are not addressing it properly, it doesn't
Mean that they're pain.
they're not
Feeling the way they do.
pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
really
it
good.
and that's something that we need to recognize, is that pain is not something that everybody is willing to acknowledge, but everybody feels it. And because we know that pain is painful, I think that we should at least recognize that if we can't understand somebody's pain, that we should at least recognize that I know what it is to be pained, and to experience pain. So give them that belief, give them that space, and respect that. I think it's about respecting people.
Very good.
And it's hard to do that, right?
It's hard to do.
So we're thinking again that we want to recap. And again, I want to just thank you so much for just partaking in this journey with me.
Absolutely.
When I wanted to do this podcast, we were looking at doing different series with different people, and you're one of the first persons that I thought would be a good person to come alongside with as a partner in creating this space that we can talk about it. And I believe that in life, everything you do better if you're careful, of course, with the right persons. You do better with two or more, right?
Takes two.
And it takes two. And I think that even whether you're doing good or bad, unity has strength.
Right.
And if you're doing it with two persons, you have different perspectives that will allow you to share into that person's headspace and decide on what it is that we need to sift out. So I'm thankful that you partnership with me in this journey. It takes two, and we're looking forward to see what God will do with what it is that we have unpacked here. So I'm so grateful for
You're
that.
so very welcome. Thank you for having me.
I am so grateful that you said yes. And we
Yes.
say it's time for us to wrap up again and to remind our viewers that you can join into the conversation by going back, right?
Absolutely.
There were like 6 episodes in this. You can go back and check out 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, and see if somewhere along the line you found something that connected with your head, if not your heart. And we're asking people to like, to share, and to subscribe, and to tell us some of the things that you would like us to talk about. Ingrid, again, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You're so
And
welcome.
and
What about a challenge, DJ?
and we're going to leave them with one challenge, and the only challenge is to go back and watch the other videos.
Okay, watch all of them.
Watch all of them and come back and tell
And
us
share it.
and share it.
And ask the questions. Ask the questions that you know, things that have been bothering you, things that you might be wondering. Well, you know, this is my opinion. You don't have to agree. And this is one of the
Yes.
things that I love about you, DJ, is that, you know, you allowed me to be myself. You were quite frank, and you didn't necessarily have to agree with everything I said. So,
And vice versa.
right. So the viewers, maybe you don't agree. Maybe you think it's okay to hurt people because you're angry, and you know.
Hopefully not. But
not.
yes, we so agree that it's important that we respect people. We don't have to agree on everything, but you do so in love and respect,
Yes.
recognizing that people's experience and their lived experience are their experiences. So again, guys, thank you so much for joining us here on It Takes Two. My name is Denise Watson, and again, my lovely
Ingrid
host.
Campbell.
Bye.
Service. Bye.